Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to see everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday night class. And tonight we are studying Parashat Kedoshim. And we're going to study the holy words of Rav Shimshon Pincus. And Rav Shimshon Pincus is going to share with us important perspectives on interpersonal relationships. And this week's Torah portion happens to be one that contains so many important and famous interpersonal relationship laws. At the top of the list, I'm going to share now 4 verses which are, one after another. They're juxtaposed. Each one tremendous and with famous lessons of our Torah. And each one deserves its own class. But I'm just going to read these 4. I think it's noteworthy to read these 4 verses together, translate them, and then we're going to analyze 2 little points that hopefully are life-changing. Let's take a look at our screen. Okay, we're in Leviticus chapter 19, verses 15, 16, 17, and 18. Let's go through them. Again, like I said, we can spend a lot of time on this, but we're just going to keep on moving. So the first verse we're going to speak about here is Lo tasu avel bamishpat, that one cannot commit any injustice during judgment, and Lo tisa pnei dal, and you shall not favor the poor person. Velo tedar pnei gadol, you cannot respect the great person, because then that's not a fair judgment. Rather, b'tzedek tishpot amitecha, you shall judge your fellow with righteousness. Powerhouse of a verse. Next, lo telech rachil be'amecha, a gossiper, a peddler, one who goes around spreading news in lashon hara, should not be amidst our people. Lo ta'almod al dam re'echa, shall not stand by your fellow's blood, meaning if someone's suffering or in the middle of dying and you can save them, you better go do so. Ani Hashem, I am the Lord. Next, verse 17, Lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha, you shall not hate your brother in your heart. Rather, hocheach tochiach et amitecha, you shall surely rebuke your fellow. Velo tisa alav het, and you shall not bear a sin on his account. A lot to talk about too. Last one, Lo tikam velo titor, you shall neither take revenge nor bear a grudge et bnei amecha, against members of the Jewish people. Ve'ahavta lerecha kamocha, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Ani Hashem, I am God. Powerful psukim, each and every one. Like I said, we don't have the time to go through each of them, but these verses, I'm imploring you over Shabbat to go read them, read Rashi, read the other Mifarshim. Again, it's chapter 19 in this week's Torah portion. It's Leviticus, chapter 19, verses 15 to 18. I mean, that whole area over there is jam-packed with very important interpersonal laws, but take a look at those. So just 2 points. The first is I want to focus on the line of Betzedek tishpot amitecha, that with righteousness you shall judge your fellow, even though the verse in the Torah is clearly talking about a judge in court, as is evident from the beginning part of the verse, not to favor the poor person, not to favor the great person. But that obligation is also one that is in the courtroom of our minds. Not only is it for a judge in court that he has to judge in a favorable light the litigants, however, each and every person also has to judge others favorably in our day-to-day interactions. And the fact is that every human being is judging on a constant basis. It's human nature. You see something, you see someone, we just judge. So we have to find ways to be creative and judge them favorably. Now, Rav Pincus, that's the general aspect, and we can elaborate on that, but I want to share with you Rav Pincus's different perspective on what judging others favorably means, or more importantly, judging a scenario in a positive way and the great benefits that has. He shares a story of an individual during World War II where the American army finally, after they beat the Nazis, Yimach Shemam, and they liberated the captives and the survivors, amongst the army, obviously like today, there were chaplains. And there was a rabbi that was serving as chaplain in the army. His name was Rabbi Eliezer Silver. And Rabbi Eliezer Silver's job was to console the survivors, organize minyanim, and any other Jewish events that needed to take place. Rabbi Silver once shared with Rabbi Pincus that there was a specific individual who consistently refused to join any function. No minyan, no nothing. No Friday night Kiddush, absolutely nothing. And when asked, he told the rabbi he wants nothing to do with Judaism and nothing to do with prayer and rituals. Nada. The man was evidently angry at God and at the Jewish people as well for what happened during World War II. So Rabbi Silver asked him, "Sir, why is your reaction so different to anyone else's? Everyone went through similar horrible experiences. Why?" He's asking why you as a captive and a survivor are any different, and why are you angrier than anyone else? And why is it you can't just come and just answer one Amen Yehei Shemei Rabbah, make the minyan for us? So the man said, when I was taken, listen to this, this is fascinating. When I was taken to the concentration camp, there was one individual in our camp that was able to smuggle in a small siddur, a small prayer book. And you know what this guy did? He rented out his prayer book to anyone who wanted to use it to pray. If you wanted it for half an hour, any time of the day, half an hour, you would have to give the owner of the book, the owner of the siddur, your half your daily portion of bread that came in. So if they gave them one slice, if they were lucky, half the slice had to go to this guy. If you wanted it for a full hour for that day, you'd have to give the full slice to this individual. That's what he did. He was renting out the book. And he was very busy. So many Jews, they wanted to pray for help, for salvation, being saved. And he was receiving so much bread for renting out his book. This man was eating so much, he actually fell ill and died. And this individual who survived was so bothered, he said, "Look at this wicked man. How could this man rent out a prayer book? He brought it in anyways, just let people use it." And because of that awful perspective he had of that guy and what he did and his gruesome end, he wanted to be not associated at all to Torah, to God, and to Jews. So Reb Silver said, why are you specifically looking and focusing on that foolish individual? Why don't you focus on something positive over here? Why don't you focus on, look how many Jews, look how many tzaddikim and tzadkaniyot were willing to give up their puny daily portion of food just to have a siddur to pray from. Look at how many people put their prayer ahead of their basic necessity of bread. So that was what he said to him. And he told him, why are you focusing on the negative side of this story, opposed to focusing on a positive morale that is definitely evident? And this, Rav Pincus says, is an example of a story that can have two very different and opposite interpretations. But the concept of B'tzedek Tishpot Amitecha, the concept of judging others favorably, is not only judging others favorably, it also obligates us to look at stories about other people, to things that happen in our life and events, and derive the positive and motivating morale and not the opposite. It's like the famous question, when you have a glass in front of you, is it half full or half empty? It's all dependent on how you look at it. And yes, human nature is to gravitate towards negativity, is to gravitate towards the emptiness. That's a fact. That's the way Hashem created us. But it doesn't mean that that's what we have to always focus on. It means we can make an active decision to focus on the positive things that happen, to look at horrible and tragic events and try to draw positive conclusions. No matter how much a person lost, look how much you still have. Those type of things. Someone, chas v'shalom, breaks a leg. At least they still have one to hop on. I'm not saying it in a joking manner, but we have to, in any and every situation, try to find something positive out of everything that happens. That too is a perspective of betzedek tishpot amitecha, of judging others favorably, judging scenarios favorably as well, and stories, and deriving positive morals. Now, the next interpersonal mitzvah that Rav Pincus addresses is one that the Talmud refers to as klal gadol, ze klal gadol b'Torah. It's a great and important rule in our Torah, and that is ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, that we have an obligation to love our fellow as ourselves, that we have to treat our fellow and love them as we would want to be treated and loved. And Rav Pincus says that in general, people get excited to do mitzvot. They're very excited. They prepare for it. They buy things. They make a prayer before. They fulfill it in every detail. They beautify the mitzvah. However, when it comes to mitzvot, commandments of gemilut chasadim, of acts of loving kindness towards other people, people don't have the same enthusiasm as when it comes to mitzvot that are not between you and your fellow. Think of the enthusiasm we have to get our arbat haminim, our 4 species on Sukkot. We go and we look and we spend so much money and we find so much more emphasis and enthusiasm than even a simple helping someone else or giving charity, right? An etrog set can cost minimally $100, could go up to way more than that. A nice set. And we do it with enthusiasm and excitement, and we don't complain. But when you give $18 to someone as in charity, it's like ripping your heart out. Why? Why is it always, when it comes to in regard, Rav Pincus is asking, of mitzvot between us and our fellow, is there a different sense of enthusiasm and excitement than when it's basically the enthusiasm and excitement is not there as when it is for other mitzvot? He gives a fascinating answer. He says that when it comes to the mitzvah of loving others and doing for others, besides for the mitzvah that we have, that we're commanded to do so, we also have a natural emotion that also makes us feel like we want to help someone else. And when we do chesed, when we do acts of loving kindness for others, unfortunately, our primary motivator is our emotions. And the secondary motivator is because it's a mitzvah. And because of that, this is why this mitzvah lacks in comparison to other mitzvot. Because our driving force is not l'shem shamayim. It's not for the sake that God commanded us to do this mitzvah. It's rather more, you have a human heart, you feel bad, you have an emotion, and that's why you're doing it. It's because our mind is focused on the function of our emotions rather than ready and focused on fulfilling an obligation that God gave us. Another example of this concept, listen to this beautiful example. Another example of how our emotions overcloud our intellect when it comes to fulfilling vigorously any type of commandment that God gave us. When a person drives a car, there are so many opportunities while driving a car to conduct some type of maneuver that is possibly dangerous and can possibly have horrible consequences. And when a person thinks about all the options of what to do, okay, they subconsciously sometimes just act and they do things which may be reckless even. But if the first thought would be, oh, it's because like this. While you are in the middle of driving, what's going on in your mind is you're analyzing how dangerous is what you're about to do going to be, and how much of a risk is it actually that, God forbid, you can get into a car accident or something bad can happen, and then you act on that. Rav Pincus says if our first thought would be, first thought in our mind is, I have a mitzvah, I have a commandment of v'nishmartem me'od lenafshotechem, that we have an obligation to be very, very careful on taking care of our well-being and on not putting ourselves in danger, then it would be a whole different outlook. We would never put ourselves in the slightest danger, because human nature and human emotions is to disregard or to discount any type of danger. Oh, it's okay, it's a fine. But situations that we find ourselves in, possibly due to the adrenaline or just discounting how dangerous it may possibly be, when it comes to eating something non-kosher or breaking Shabbat or other such mitzvot between us and Hashem, there's absolutely no option. Why? Because our emotions are not really involved over there. It's for the sole reason that Hashem commanded us to do this. So our emotions, what we learn from here, can easily cloud our intellect. The intellect of knowing that Hashem commanded us to do something, we obviously have to do that, but there are outside emotions which sometimes override it. And those emotions may sometimes not even be bad, right? Like the feeling to want to give and help someone. But because that is our primary driving force, that takes away from the enthusiasm of fulfilling the mitzvah. And this explains why it's so difficult to be mindful during the most important mitzvot. As the Talmud said, Klal Gadol b'Torah ve'aftar lecha kamocha, great important mitzvah of loving your fellows yourself. Because now we see that when our intellect of fulfilling the mitzvah, that intention is not at the forefront of our mind, there's very, very hard. It's very, very hard for us to keep to fulfilling that mitzvah. So now that we know this can be applied in many, many different areas. We first of all now have to make a special effort to keep the mitzvah itself, whatever mitzvah we're doing, at the forefront of our mind, that the obligation, that what we're doing is to first fulfill the obligation. Then you may have a secondary reason. But when the first thought in our mind is that we're fulfilling an obligation, a mitzvah of Hashem, whatever it may be, helping others, loving others, giving to others, keeping Shabbat, eating kosher. If a person's only reason about eating kosher is because they feel that's a healthy lifestyle, as soon as a scientific paper comes out saying otherwise, well, you're not going to be so motivated to keep kosher anymore. If you now were sold on the fact that, once a week, it's so great, we turn off all electronics and we relax and we need that time to air out. If they come up with some type of machine that you have to sleep on a daily basis, and that gets you into a really deep interval of sleep, and you're so rejuvenated that you don't feel like you need every seventh day off anymore, well then, if your main reason why you're keeping Shabbat is not because Hashem commanded you to do so, you got an issue. So everything we do, we always have to understand that there could be ulterior motives or reasons that make sense and even rationally sense to us. But intellectually, we always have to have at the forefront of our mind that what we are doing, we're fulfilling because Hashem commanded us to do so. That's a big concept also now coming up to Shavuot, Matan Torah, Har Sinai, that we do what we do because we're commanded to do it first. Afterwards, we try to make sense and understand a little bit about it, or the more the better about it. But first and foremost, because Hashem commanded us, and it was a mitzvah from Hashem for us to do. So tonight we learned from Rav Pincus two amazing, amazing concepts. The first of B'tzedek tishpot amitecha, the obligation that we have to judge others favorably. Of course, that means in court, and it also means when you see someone else doing something. But the new perspective, the novelty was also scenarios. When you see something, when you hear something, always try to spin it for the good, for your own moral, motivational, positive way as much as possible. And the second lesson is that of loving your fellow as yourself, truly, truly loving your fellow as yourself, and finding within you the reason of first doing so because we are obligated to do so can help us overcome our natural emotions that are good. But if those come before our intellect to observe the mitzvah, that may be the reason why you're not so enthusiastic and motivated to fulfill those mitzvahs between you and your fellow. And there are certain people I know, I'm not going to name them. There are certain people I know that whenever they're doing something for someone else, whether they articulate it or not, it is evident on how they do it and with the zealousness that they do it, and with their tone of voice and just their mood, that they're doing it because they see it as an opportunity to fulfill Hashem's commandment to help others and to do good to others. And that's something we need to strive to. It's so, so important. And we're ending a little early, so I'm going to add one more thing. Whenever it comes to helping others, it needs to be 100% a priority. But the first people we need to help, and I'm speaking to myself more than anyone else, because as a father of young children, this is always a I don't want to call it a battle, but it's always a struggle of chesed, acts of loving kindness starts at home. You cannot be a hero, Superman, Superwoman to the entire world and come home and bark and have no patience. It's very, very hard. We have to be somewhat perfect at work, at school, out in the streets, at the community center, in front of everyone. And then too many people feel like, oh, well, if my neighbor asks me to do something, no problem. Oh, but if my wife asks me or my husband asks me to do something, no. Why not? Of course, we have that emotion that we have to want to help. But maybe if we realize that is a mitzvah as well. I mean, the classic case, your neighbor comes and asks you to help them with a plumbing issue or a light bulb issue or a gardening issue. And you go out and you'll spend half an hour, 45 minutes, no problem. And then your wife or your husband asks you to do something that should take 5 or 10 minutes. You have no time. That doesn't make any sense. And by the way, your spouse understands that and knows that. And that hypocrisy irks them to their core, rightfully so. Most of the time, this issue is with the husbands, us husbands. It's us that I see some smiles. It's us, the men, who have that issue of being so helpful and so generous with our time to others before our spouse and children. And it's something that we need to realize, that as much as it is a mitzvah, then emotion, right? We understand. Let's get that straight. First, it's an obligation, and then it's an emotion. As much as it's an obligation and emotion to help others, it is more important and an obligation and an emotion to help your family before others. Now, this doesn't mean to be selfish. Everyone needs a different talk. Certain people who are superheroes out in the world, they need this talk. And other people who are extremely selfish and only doing for their family need to step outside their comfort zone and help others. Everyone knows where they stand. Everyone knows if they need to do a little more effort on helping at home or their spouse, or a little more effort on stepping out and helping your neighbor and other community members. So everyone take the lesson. Again, this is all about, looking at pulling up the positive morale from this. Don't hear this and say, oh, I already do so much at home, I don't need to do anything. No, on the contrary, that means you need to do more out. And if you do more out, too much out, make sure you help more in the house. B'ezrat Hashem, Hashem will bless us, that all of these great lessons will become part and parcel with us, and we'll live up to them, and that our children, our grandchildren will see us act in these ways genuinely, and that is the best way to transfer these great morals and ethics onto the next generation and generations, B'ezrat Hashem. Thank you everyone for joining us.